While minigames are half the fun of the Mario Party experience, what truly makes the franchise stand out is its boards, and each installment of the games feels so very different, mainly due to the board mechanics of each individual title that keeps on adding and reinventing the board mechanics. Therefore, I would love to rank all of Super Mario Party's 4 party mode boards. A fast disclaimer, I have previously made a video where I talk about some fundamental flaws of the boards in Super Mario Party and how they are designed to be far more competitive than normal, where more strategic players can gain a huge advantage by properly navigating through the boards. With that in mind, I will rate these boards as such, which means that I will rate these boards from how fun they are when they are played in a somewhat competitive optimal way, and how well these boards support such a playstyle, and how well they keep together during these circumstances. With that in mind, let us dig into the list. On the bottom of the list, we find Whomp's Domino Ruins. Whomp's Domino Ruins is a real blast to the past and feels very much like a remake of the classic DK's Jungle Adventure from Mario Party 1. The board design is extremely similar to the point that at first glance one would be forgiven to think that this board is just a 1-1 remake of the classic board, but with Super Mario Party's board rule mechanics. However, there are some very large differences. The biggest difference is shown early on with how the boulder mechanics works. Anyone familiar with the boulder from DK's Jungle Adventure is painfully aware of how quickly it can send you several turnbacks in your journey towards the star, and more importantly, the boost, by sending you throughout the entire board past every single point of interest throughout the entire thing. In Super Mario Party, they decided to make these boulders far more forgiving. To begin with, instead of sending you forward, the boulder sends you back. This means you are at most losing a couple of turns, and that's still a pretty neat section of the map. In addition to this, the happening spaces that activates the boulder trap is removed once activated. So each of the spaces can only be activated once. This heavily limits how many times players can be messed over by this particular mechanic. This is probably done as a result of Super Mario Party having far less turns than Mario Party 1. The result of this though is that what in earlier installments felt like a board-defined mechanic has become extremely watered down and stale. Another change that feels like it waters down the feeling of DK Jungle Adventure quite a bit is that the Whomps who guards passages and takes a fee for you to pass by have been way less cruel as well. They allocate a few sections of the map and are only costing you 3 coins instead of 10. While everything in Super Mario Party has become much cheaper to accommodate the lower amount of turns, this reduction is far more heavy than that, and the result is that it will almost never hurt anyone to pass by a Whomp. It makes a board that was previously quite rough a lot easier to navigate. The reason for this is because many of these board star spawns are located painfully close to the Golden Pipe Shop. This in effect means that players will only really walk across the left side of the board for most of the game, as players will almost definitely keep the warp pipe to get back to the shop once the star spawns near it. This means that most of this otherwise very cleverly designed board gets looked over past the first couple of turns it takes for the player to initially get to the first star. The fact that there is a Lakitu still nearby as well means that this player could pay for their fun at the expense of the players who haven't made it to that point yet, draining their economy. Which means that this is a board where it is very much possible to gain a strong lead and from that position just instantly keep on increasing that lead with little the rest can do to do anything about it. Another fun yet very minor space is the happening space on the bottom left corner of the square you end up in if you take to the left at the second junction for the starting position that lets you play a fun minigame where you get to choose between 3 treasure boxes that can give you either 3 coins, 10 coins or an item. It is very rare to end up on this one, and the reward is sort of minor, but it's potentially a very good boost to the economy nonetheless if you end up landing on it, on a board where keeping your economy going is fundamental to remain at the right side of the board at all times. While on paper this board looks like a fun and amazing board, the fact that it feels like a watered down DK's Jungle Adventure and it allows and actively encourages the players to very much ignore over half of the board makes it a pretty boring board to play at that just makes me wish I was playing a modern version of Donkey Kong's Jungle Adventure instead, that has items. Whomp's Domino Ruins is a board that heavily suffers from Super Mario Party's far too generous economy. And that is sad, as if it wasn't because of the golden pipe shop that is very conveniently located where all the stars spawns. This would be an amazing board to travel around with plenty of interesting decisions to be made. On the bronze medal position of this list, we find Kamek Tantalizing Tower. This board is probably the most unique board of the bunch and serves as this game's final board. The final boards of most Mario Party games are infamous for their remarkably cruel happening spaces and board mechanics that are intended to heavily punish the players as they go along to entertain Bowser. However, Kamek's Tantalizing Tower breaks this tradition heavily by being the most rewarding table in maybe all of Mario Party's history. To begin with, this board starts off giving the players 6 coins instead of 3 if they end up on a blue space. Yes, you read that right, players are given 6 coins for landing on a blue space on this board from turn 1. This is a very powerful economic boost that makes it so that even if you do not end up winning plenty of minigames, your economy will still look solid. There must be a catch, right? Yes, there is, but that is also mostly a rewarding catch. Kamek's Tantalizing Tower allows you to buy 2 stars whenever you reach Toad, and during the final 3 turns, you can, if you can afford it, purchase 3 stars each and every single time you pass by Toad. Yes, you read that correctly. Star and coin counts tend to go up very high on this board compared to other boards. There is, however, one very interesting mechanic to follow this, and that is how the star price are set. Whenever someone purchases the stars, the prices changes. The options are either 5, 10 or 15 coins per star. This means that there is an interesting sub-game going on this board where players will try to compete to get to the star space whenever the stars cost 5 and heavily try to avoid when it costs 15. In my observations, it seems entirely random what the next star price is going to be. However, it does not repeat the old price, so if it costs 50 now, it will either cost 10 or 5 after the next person passes the star space. And this board's 2 only junctions and generously placed out item shops are there to help you out to get to the star whenever you want to get to it. While this board feels about linear as many of Mario Party 1's boards, it does offer some interesting choices with its very sparingly placed out junctions. The most interesting one is the second junction that either takes you to star if you pay the 2 more money per person will pass by, like Yoshi's Tropical Island in Mario Party 1, or sends you on a little detour. This means that a rich player can make this route very unattractive for other players to take. However, the interesting part with this junction is how it works together with the first junction to make it normally an unattractive path to take. You see, the first junction is almost as fast as the second junction, but it has an item shop as well. There is a catch with this item shop though, and that is that all items in it are overpriced and you have to purchase one of the items, and it does not restock until all 3 items are bought. The 3 items in questions are a dash mushroom, a poison mushroom, and a custom die block, and they all cost 6 coins, which is heavily overpriced for some of these items. I can tell you this much, almost no one is going to gladly pay 6 coins for a poison mushroom. However, they might be more willing to pay 6 coins for a poison mushroom than to pay 5 coins to getting nothing. The way these junctions normally work together is that if you want to rush to the star, you take the first junction upwards towards the star, while you plan on passing on going up on both the junctions in case star price is high, and you do not want to purchase stars for 50 coins each. While you do take the section junction upwards in case someone somehow gets to the star way faster than they wish to, like for example rolling very high and you rolling very low. To make the star price far more attractive, it should be seen as a way to change your course in case something happens and not as a default path you take. Another interesting aspect of the first junction and taking the other way is that it does have 2 happening spaces next to one another that when activated will cause the chain jump to attack whoever lands that space. While taking left at the first junction happening space that takes you to the red pipeline, which has a key to waiting for you. Needless to say, if you can land on this space, go left on the first junction and do so. While the star still is expensive on this table, taking 1 star from an opponent is a very powerful move if you have the money to do so, while still feeling safe in purchasing 2 stars next time you visit Toad. And if you don't, getting some more money on this board where money is the only limitations is such a powerful move. There is also event space at the start of the board and at the end of the board. The ones that starts bring you up one floor, make you skip the first junction and most of the first half of the table into a position for which, if you want, you can go straight up to purchase a star very quickly. And the space right before the star forces a price change, which can be very useful if the price is high and you know you are going to be the next one to buy a star, or extremely punishing if the opposite is the case. While this board is very fun as a minigame skill testing board, because let's face it, if someone wins every single minigame and can keep pushing forward by purchasing dash mushrooms and double and eventually triple stars no matter the price, each time they pass a shop, that person would almost certainly always win on this board, as they would never need to hold anything back. The board mechanics themselves feels pretty boring after the first couple of plays. It feels far too similar to Mars Rainbow Castle, which in my opinion is probably one of the worst Mario Party boards in the history, due to its lack of meaningful choices and heavily reliance on rolling what you want on the die to end up at the star space when it is beneficial to do so. Like I said, it is a fantastic board for a minigame fest, but if you want a board where the players plans a lot and where board strategies matters a lot to the outcome, this is by far the least strategic board in Super Mario Party, which makes this a horrible board for this purpose. Which still makes it a completely fine board, mind you, as sometimes you just want to do some high economy games with large numbers of coins and stars. Something that this board is amazing at delivering. But it is rarely I want that if I play party mode, so therefore this table suffers quite a bit from this. The silver medal goes to King Bob-omb's Powder Cake Mine. I'm going to be very honest here. When I first played Super Mario Party, I did not just dislike this board. It was by far my least favorite board. King Bob-omb's Powder Cake Mine does at first glance appear to be one of the most boring and most randomly punishing Mario Party boards ever. But once players start to see the deeper strategies hidden underneath all of its clever space placements, it starts to become far more interesting. The design of the board looks pretty interesting to begin with. The board is split into 4 outer cycles that intersect in the 5th inner cycle, which creates a situation in which there can sometimes, due to the length of some of these cycles, lead situations where players can go several turns without seeing a single junction. And if they dedicated themselves to a star in that one long cycle, they might find themselves in a rough position if someone gets ahead of them and steals the star. Therefore, it's a good thing that along the cycle of this board, the top one that is reached through going right after the middle and upwards in the junction that follows, leads to a key to making missing the star after going through this junction far less punishing, as you can just steal a star instead. It also helps it out a lot that it also leads to an item shop where the player can purchase a golden mushroom to make the travel slightly faster and to make sure they miss the devastating event space that is up ahead that leads them to the bottom left cycle after the golden pipe shop that resides there. Which is the sole reason why anyone would ever really go through that cycle unless the star is there. While this cycle is extremely attractive to take as a default cycle in case you are currently not in a position to change the star, it does have a couple of really huge potential drawbacks. The first one is that there is not a single ally space throughout the entire cycle up until the point you are back in the middle again, which means you go several turns without even the opportunity to gain an ally, which is huge on this table where allies are extremely important due to the sometimes very long cycles. The other very dangerous thing to be on the lookout for on this board is the very top of the table, where there are 2 paths and which path you take depends on which mode the belt is on, which changes whenever anyone lands on the happening space before or after that section. If you're forced through the upper half on the end of it, you get a Bob-omb ally, which will stay with you for 3 turns. This ally, however, unlike other allies, either gives you 0 or -1 to your die roll. This is, however, not the most dangerous part about it. The worst part is that if you already have 4 allies, this Bob-omb ally replaces one of your current allies. It's a very rare event to sit on 4 allies, and it's usually only happening towards the end of the long game. But if you do, stay out this path no matter what you do, as allies in Super Mario Party are one of the most important resources, as they are tied to at least 2 bonus stars. The bottom right cycle is a relatively eventless one, but it should be noted that there are 2 ally spaces in this relatively short cycle, meaning that on each roll on the normal die, you usually have a 1 in 6 chance to get an ally. This makes this a very attractive cycle to walk through to get some allies. However, normally this cycle is taken in case you would end up on the card happening space if you would take the upper right cycle, as it would put you on an item space where there is a 1 in 6 chance on the upcoming at least 2 turns of landing on an ally space, which is not a bad play at all early on, especially compared to getting to the bottom left cycle after the item shop. The upper left cycle is the by far shortest cycle of the entire board, but hosts 2 event spaces that triggers a minigame in which a player can win a lot of coins very quickly, which makes a fantastic cycle to farm some quick coins in case you are running really low on funds. The bottom left cycle leads to this board's Golden Pipe shop, and has an event space right after the shop takes you to Lakitu cycle, which might make that sound like an always pick space to land on. However, this is certainly not always the case, because if you remain in the middle instead of taking this cycle, you will instead land on an ally space. Keep in mind how many turns are left and how your economy is looking before you choose between these 2 very powerful plays. While the middle cycle mostly seems to serve as an intersection between all the other cycles, it is actually a quite situationally attractive cycle in itself. It has a ridiculously high amount of luck and item spaces and even holds an ally space. There is, however, a huge risk to stay in the middle of this board. This board's signature event, the Royal Explosion, or as I like to call it, the Poverty Dance. King Babam has a counter under him, and each time anyone lands on one of the many event spaces in the middle cycle, the number decreases by 1. If it ever reaches 0, every single person in the middle cycle of the board loses half of their coins. You read that right, half of their coins. This can vary between being a minor setback to an extremely severe event that can ruin your entire game plan. If you see this number going low, you should strongly consider whether or not it's worth staying in the middle in case you would get to experience the dreaded Poverty Dance, or if you should evacuate at the first possible junction. These options of the board makes each and every one of these 5 cycles very attractive for a various amount of reasons. Unless I am always certain I will reach the star first, I will never pick which cycle I pick and go through based on where the star spawns. The strategic advantages of each of these cycles are powerful to the point of them never feeling minor, and each of them affects different bonus stars in quite remarkable ways. Generally speaking, the Lakitu cycle is the default one to begin with. Not only is it very likely that the star spawns along this cycle, but Lakitu's deals are very important early on, and the fact that it starts strong with several item spaces and an item shop means you usually got fuel to get through most cycle without any larger issues. The only exception to this rule is if I can get an ally or 2 by heading any other way, as allies are far too important in Super Mario Party, especially early in the game and especially on this board. And I would never say no to an ally on this board in particular due to the size of it and extreme length of the Lakitu cycle, even at the expense of getting a star. The biggest appeal of this board for me though, and why I rate it highly, is that it's the only board that I feel makes a good job balancing the weird economy in Super Mario Party due to how strong Lakitu's steals for stars are on this board, due to the reduced power of the Golden Pipes, which really balances the economy up, especially in combination with the Poverty Dance that can keep very rich players in check, while also making keeping a small buffer of money a sometimes mandatory move, as you never know when your economy gets cut in half. On the gold medal spot, we fight an unlikely yet highly deserving board, Mega Fruit Paradise. There is no board on paper looks as horrible as Mega Fruit Paradise. To begin with, it is an island hopper that's extremely reliant on happening spaces for its movement, which is usually a sign of many of the absolute worst board in Mario Party. However, it does work remarkably well in Super Mario Party. I feel like a huge part of this is the mechanics that are unique to Super Mario Party. The fact that we have 6-sided die and unique character die that affects what space you can land on makes it possible to sort of manipulate what space you are most likely to end up on, to the point that transporting yourself through 2 space-wide happening spaces lines is far more plausible to aim for and less likely to be an annoyance than it would be in earlier Mario Party titles with 10-sided die that you can't really manipulate. Each island and its pros and cons also definitely helps to make this feel much better. Each of the 4 islands have very different pros and cons. I will start by going through the most important and potentially most powerful of these 4 maps, the bottom left one. This is the most powerful place to be walking around in probably all of Mario Party history. There are plenty of things like item spaces, luck spaces, and even an ally space, but that is nothing compared to the main attraction of this island, the Golden Pipe Shop. I don't think I need to point out how extremely powerful the Golden Pipe is on an island hopper map where movement throughout the map is very rough to navigate. And to have the Golden Pipe easily accessible on an island that's only 12 spaces long, where 5 of the 12 spaces are luck, item, or ally spaces, is ridiculous. The only problem with this island is that it, like all other islands, has 2 spaces which leads us to an island on the opposite end of it. An island I will go into later to throw you out of the Golden Pipe carousel. This island is just as powerful as it sounds, but to prevent players from constantly traveling around this island for the entirety of the game, they added a timer to the shop. After it's been purchased from around 4 times, it will start spinning on a roulette. If the roulette ends up triggering the event, it will cause the ice cream above the shop to melt, forcing Flutter to close the shop permanently. That's right, once enough players have passed the shop is closed for the rest of the game. This is such genius design for an island hopper, as it encourages players to early on stock up on warping items, as Strong getting out of Yale cards, which prevents the most prominent problem of most island hopper boards, which is that a player can be stuck in an unfortunate position for several turns, and sometimes all players can be stuck preventing stars from being purchased, which makes the game fully stop. But also encourage them to not immediately use them, as they can no longer stop up on more, so they are only really used if they are truly needed. The other really interesting island is the top left island that is very short, yet has a very interesting and exciting event. A present box event, where the players pick one of 2 boxes that can hold one of 3 different characters. A piranha plant that takes your coins, a Koopa paratroopa that can fly you to another player, which is very useful to get to another player's good position, and Lakitu. Needless to say, this island is a very powerful but risky island to walk around, as while you get Lakitu Steal after Lakitu Steal to steal stars from players on this board, where getting the stars might be a very difficult endeavor. However, you are just as likely to end up with Piranha Plant keeping on stealing your coins turn after turn, slowly draining your economy to the point where you can no longer steal any stars. The other 2 islands are relatively tame compared to these 2 islands that have very swingy effects to them. But the bottom right island has a normal item shop where players can restock on golden dash mushrooms, which are far more powerful on this board than on any other board due to them absolutely certainly moving you 5 more spaces forward, which can make you dodge event spaces that takes you to one island that you don't really want to go to. And the top right island has an event space with a special event where the player lights up 1 light, and the player who lights up the 2nd light afterwards is rewarded with a star for free. Needless to say, if you can land on space after it has already been landed on once, do it! While you can only get from the top to the bottom half of the board through event spaces, traveling from left to right is often far easier, as you can take one of the bridges to get over there. Each of the bridges does have its own mechanics though, to not exactly make this travel free. The top bridge has plenty of happening spaces, which triggers a large blooper which throws the player to a starting position on the bottom right island, which can either be exactly what the player wants or what they do not want at all. It is quite an interesting way to handle the island hopping, especially combined with the easily obtainable golden pipes that player might have stocked up on early on in the game. The bottom bridge is both kinder and harsher than the top bridge in how it lets players pass. Initially, this beautiful sand bridge will with ease carry the players from one side of the board to the other. But just like the shop that rests on this island, it eventually starts to crumble and eventually falls, at which point the player who tries to cross the bridge falls into the water and loses some coins and are forced to end their movement, and the bridge is gone. Getting stuck on these 2 bottom islands against your will after the bridge has crumbled is obviously something you really want to avoid at all costs. and something that you better hold on to a golden pipe to prevent happening late in the game. What makes this board stand out so much and makes it reach the top spot of this list is how well balanced each of the islands are with their pros and cons, and how that board encourages players to stock up on some golden pipes early on to be able to get through rough spots later. There is something so lovely with a table that forces players to think of the late game already in the early game and start preparing themselves, and where the player has so much control over their fate on an island hopper through clever use of the mechanics Super Mario Party gives them. While the other boards either tries to negate the impact of the unique mechanics of Super Mario Party or are held back by them, Mega Fruit Paradise is the only map that truly manages to embrace them and use the unique mechanics of this game to its advantage, to the point where this map would have been horrible in any other entry to the series, but works so phenomenally well here. If anyone wants to play a long game of Super Mario Party with me, this is the board I would suggest we play 9 out of 10 times, as long as the other players are experienced with the game and knows what to do. Which brings us to the sole weakness of this board. An inexperienced player would struggle badly on this board. If they do not know that the most important thing early on is to try to stack up on golden pipes, but tries to rush the stars instead, they would probably have a really bad time in the late game, when they will most likely need golden pipes to navigate, and end up being stuck on a horrible island for turn after turn. Even just getting some bad rolls early on might set the player back several turns. However, a good player should be able to recover, yet it can be a problem even for an experienced player if they can't get a golden pipe before the shop disappears. Although there are backup strategies good players can use, but those are not really transparent to newer players. Despite this flaw, this is my by far favorite board on Super Mario Party. This is, however, just my opinion, and I would love to hear yours. Do you agree with me, or do you think I am wrong for putting an island hopper on the number 1 spot on the list? Feel free to leave your thoughts in the comment section below. If you like this video and want to see more in the future, feel free to subscribe to my channel for more video game related videos from me in the future. If you want to know my thoughts on the different items in Super Mario Party, feel free to watch my video where I rank all the 9 items in Super Mario Party depending on how good I think they are. If you want to know what I think is the sole biggest flaw in Super Mario Party's board, feel free to watch my video on the right where I go through that. Until next time, plenty of hugs and stay cute.